Well, hello everyone, and a happy new year to you all.
Happy New Year as
Happy
we're
New
into a
Year.
few weeks in.
Few weeks into January, but it's the new year for the whole month of January. As we say, January is the Monday of the year.
Yeah. I
So it's the beginning of the year.
was gonna
Uh,
say take that as you want, you know? No one likes Mondays, everyone likes
no,
Mondays. I don't know, you interpret.
nobody likes Mondays. That's why everyone gets the Sunday scaries, right?
Yeah.
So the week before New Year's, everyone gets scared and hustles for their resolutions and get to the gym. Anyways, we've talked about that already. We don't need to go back down that path. No, I will not be going to the gym if anyone. Okay.
So good.
So good. Okay, so we have a really good episode in store for all of you. For those who aren't aware, this is obviously the More People, More Problems podcast. I forgot, I should probably say the title with your hosts, Britt. Yes, there she is. And Chelsea, that's me. So we've got a good episode in store for y'all. If you're liking the content, if you're enjoying it, please drop us a like or a share or I don't know, a heart or a comment. Comment, you might like it. You might have some other thoughts on it. Who knows? You might have some ideas for topics that you'd like us to explore. So your feedback's super important to us, actually, engaging whether we're engaging gauging
We
whether
want some data.
yeah
Just a little, preamble to the episode.
we want the data points. Okay, so on that note, we are actually going to talk about um, data and how we use data to drive decision making in our business
Yeah.
organizations. So I'm going to toss
Specifically,
it over
probably a
to
little
Brett.
bit more around people, but in general
Oh,
as well.
people decisions, yes, sorry for that, important. Thanks for taking half my job, Brett, because I couldn't manage it all, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to toss it over to you, Britt, to help us intro this topic.
Yeah, I love this topic. I spent a lot of time while I was at Shopify thinking and I guess actively acquiring data around people analytics to make better decision making. And I saw it from the beginning when we were 20 employees until, when I left and we were on 10,000 and just the evolution of it and what mattered and I guess how I grew my knowledge base around it. And so I guess I wanted to kick it off by talking about, small company or small team where you're making decisions. And so when we were around 25 employees and all the way up to about 100, we would make decisions all the time. And I remember Toby or other execs asking me, for example, I would say, hey, we're going to do a catered lunch this week because we want to bring everyone together and do a little team building in advance of some big launch. And it's like, okay, I think we should bring in this type of food. And they would ask why. And I was like, well, because I like it. Or I'd say because I know that this is very popular. And they'd be like, well, how do you know? And I'd be like, well, I talked to Chelsea and I talked to Katie and I heard feedback from this person. So I think this is the best bet. And they're like, but are you just talking to the people you know? Or are you just choosing something you want? And I'm like, no, no, no. And at the time, I know this sounds like a very simple decision to make, but at the time, I didn't realize what I was really doing was over the span of, let's say, the 3, 4 months from the last time we did something similar, I was actually acquiring a lot of qualitative data. I was acquiring some quantitative as well. I was like, did you like getting food? Yes or no? Very binary, very statistical number. But a lot of times, more often than not, I was like, hey, did you come? Did you enjoy it? What did you like? Was it healthy? Was it not? Oh, like someone who didn't go. Why didn't you go? Why didn't you attend? Was it the topic? Was it the food? Did it not meet your allergies? I was acquiring information all the time. And so I was able to make better decisions for everyone included. But when I got asked, I didn't realize what I was doing. So I just froze and was like, well, this is the best decision. I know what it is.
Right.
It obviously got more, I'd say, complex when it was things around like performance management
Sure.
and how we evolve the system. And once again, I would get asked, well, why are we changing this? Why aren't we using the same language to describe whether someone is meeting expectations or not? Why do you feel the need to evolve this product offering to the company? And I would once again go back and be like, well, because I know, just trust me. And that anytime someone says that, let's be honest, that's,
Trust in
yeah,
me.
you got to go like, well, no, that's worrisome. And let's dig into the why. And so as we grew and as I got more, I guess, knowledgeable, I started to realize all the different ways you could acquire information and data and how that would either drive or inform decisions going forward. And so the first lesson actually that I learned was the difference of being data driven versus data informed. And it was because I read the book on Google, Work Rules. I think that was the first one. I should double check. But they talked so much about data in there. And I realized in that moment that, in my personal opinion, Google is a very data driven company. They acquired information and pulled data back on everything they did. From, when people came into the office, they were putting a sentiment analysis, whether it was like, I'm feeling good today, I'm feeling sad today, I'm feeling exhausted. It's like, click the smiley face. To when they completed work, they would then have to rate everyone and how they performed. To, like, name the thing, there was data being inputted in surveys and, qualitative, quantitative, and that data drove decisions, meaning they had a hypothesis, they measured for it, and if there was a solution that they believed came from that, that was the decision and that was the outcome. Whereas there was a different way of thinking about it, and that was being data informed. And what data informed means is that you collect all the data, you still have hypothesis, you still, want to remove biases and seek more information within the process, but you let those outcomes or those insights or that analysis inform the decision going forward rather than drive the decision.
Okay.
And for me, my strong belief is that you should always be data informed when making people decisions because humans are very complex and rarely, if ever, are we binary. And so looking at data and seeing that and only looking at the analysis as one kind of black and white outcome of it's either a yes answer or a no answer or it's driven that way, I think you lose a lot of, I guess, the magic, the insight, the extra information that will make a really customized and appropriate strategic decision going forward. And so from there, early on, we had a really strong core belief that we were going to be data informed going forward at the company. I don't know if they still are, can't speak for them, but I strongly, strongly believe that that is a kind of core belief that when dealing with human decisions, you should do. So I kind of went off from my first story to my second one, but I'll pause there and you can get me back on track, Charles.
Get you back on track. So I think it's really important that you just differentiate between the data informed and the data driven because I think a lot of people use them interchangeably. But if you go and do a little bit of research or if you're knowledgeable, it's obviously really clear. So when we're data driven, we're missing those key pieces of context, right? So we've got context, and when we look at decision making as a whole, for sure, data is super important. You've got quantitative, you've got qualitative, but there's other items that need to go into your decision making or other factors like business interests, regulatory bodies. Depending what business you're in, you're probably dealing with someone in the government or some sort of legislation. Strategic interests, goals, looking at your competition as well, and like network interests. So when we break down the decision making and look at our difference between the informed and the driven, it's important that we're informed by data and then we're layering all those other pieces that are relevant to our organization. Okay, so on that note, Britt, do you have a specific example where you can kind of outline to us that difference between being data driven and data informed?
Yeah, I got one that was always very clear to me. So when you go into doing performance management, impact analysis, you start to get data on every employee, especially as you scale. When you're 50 employees, you kind of know how everyone's doing and whether you write it down or collect specific or not, you got a good idea. But at 1,000 or 5,000, you need to have a mechanism to be able to zoom out and be able to look across and see all the information. And so you start to ask people, okay, let's say impact. So you ask everyone, how is Chelsea, how's your 5 employees doing? Please give us some information on each of them. And I'm going to get you to either, in a data driven company, rank each employee on whether they're underperforming, performing, or performing above average. And so you have 3 different, selection items. Data driven would be if you selected for your employee 1 that they're above average, that would then drive a specific compensation adjustment being in a specific percentage. It might actually get them to go within a certain pool of candidates within the company that are opening up for new job opportunities. It would drive results and decisions to come all based on one selection of what ranking did you give their performance.
Mhm.
On the flip side, data informed, just off the bat, I would say never rank someone. I would say select a category that they fit in.
Mhm.
And the category, even the specific simple language of category, gives you a visual of, okay, someone can ebb and flow between these. They can fit maybe on the low end or the high end, but it's giving me an intention of where they're at. We might still name them the same, which is their category right now is under, regular, or above. But that category would then inform future decisions, meaning we would collect all that data. We might actually then even calibrate to get more insights. Like you were saying, the great thing about being data informed is we look at a data piece as one piece of critical input, but then you build upon it with extra context. So you might say, oh, well, their impact outcome was extremely above everyone else. But actually, culturally wise, they're just a toxic asshole. And we need to take that into account. But that doesn't fit in that other ranking that we would have got. And so, based on this additional input, we might actually want to adjust and not give them a compensation raise this year. We might want to say, well, you know what? We got to work on that one piece of attitude adjustment before they get more opportunities. It's informing decisions and it's taking critical insights to then make a better decision, but it's not driving a decision or outcome based on specific insights. So, pros and cons, there's both to each side. The pro to data driven is you remove more biases because you don't have as much subjective nature. But the con is you're making decisions in isolated states and you aren't leaving, to me, that nuance of just humans and complexity. And so, data informed, you introduce more subjectivity, you introduce more information. But I believe that benefit of having real-time customizable decisions outweighs the cons of having potentially introduced more biases or anything else.
And I think that that's an amazing example because a lot of what we talk about in performance management or talent management is not only about the what you do, but it's about the how you do it.
Yeah.
And the how is the subjective, it's the qualitative and whatnot. Because if we were just going based on the data in terms of that ranking, the rating, whatever the case may be, they achieved everything, achieved, 10 priorities, all achieved. But like you said, turns out this person's an asshole. Turns out this person needs sensitivity training. Turns out this person does everything by themselves and doesn't empower anyone on their team to actually do work. There's no delegation. So, that how is a really key piece that needs to be factored in, especially when we start talking about compensation and whatnot. And funny enough, a lot in the public service, you're looking at, does this person have any harassment complaints against them and stuff like that? Like, you'd be surprised like how those types of things can come up. You can get an excellent performance rating, it's based on results achieved, but you've forgotten a really, really key piece of information in
Yeah.
managing the people, or whatever
Well,
the case may be.
I think that also highlights the fact of what data do you actually collect when making decisions? I think that's an issue in data people and analytics in general, like what you just said. Why wouldn't we, when talking about impact on a business, consider things outside of the job itself? Like
Mhm.
that's actually a really important data piece to look at. And it's why you want to take multiple sources of data when making one decision or driving or informing whatever choice you make. But I think that highlights some of the struggles in even building the infrastructure to be able to make data informed decisions. Like we had a lot of these beliefs early on, and we fundamentally built programs that were data informed, and we talked about it a lot because we really wanted to empower leaders to add context and to make the right decisions, not just to almost be lazy and use the data as a scapegoat to be like, well, I didn't decide on any increases, the data told me, I inputted da 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 and this was the outcome, so don't get mad at me, go get mad at HR. It's like that's bullshit. As a leader, you have full ability to make a better decision based on context you have, but you need to defend it and you need to pull in the data to make that case. And so when looking at that, I think the first step really for anyone is to start to ask yourself, what information do I need to pull in? What hypothesis do I have in this organization? What information do I want to look across the board when making really important decisions? And do I even have the mechanisms to collect that? I think so many times we don't even build the infrastructure to start pulling it in. And like to start, when we were only 100, I would just pull Excel docs. It was
Right.
very manual. Once we got larger and more sophisticated, it was, I mean, much more beautiful. And thank you to the talent team, analytics team. But like you get scrappy and you do it in different ways. But I think you have to start collecting
Yes.
information and data of all of the important pieces to even begin to understand it.
Yeah, I think that that's really important. I look back at my time in recruitment and thinking about we collected so much data. We had people who were applying into our selection processes for an armed officer position in the thousands, right? So we needed to look at recruitment across the entire country. And we're looking at factors, equity and diversity as well. And you're looking in remote and rural locations as well, because we want to see where we can staff folks in offices in those locations as well. So probably folks who already live there is a good bet. Anyways, I remember a couple of decisions we had made early on when I started really digging into the data that we had on these folks who would apply in from remote and rural locations and their success rate through a very intricate 8-step selection process. And what I noticed in one area in St. John's, for example, was that we were getting a good applicant base, but then we were getting a drop off at one point, and it was like, and we had always indicated that as failures, whatever, dropouts, withdrawals, whatever the case may be. When we looked into it, we actually realized that those weren't true failures, i.e., well, not all of them. They weren't all true failures on an assessment. A lot of them were withdrawals at a certain point in the process. And it turns out when we started to dig into that and quantify it a little bit more, turns out it's because those people didn't have access to certain testing centers, or
Hmm.
they were members of certain groups and they didn't have childcare, or certain factors of that nature, or it was a 5-hour drive from their home and then they would just drop out, right? So
I
on
love this example.
so, on the surface, when we looked at it from a business perspective, had we been data driven, we'd have said, it's not worth our time to be recruiting there. It's not worth the costs. No one's succeeding. So, I mean, scrap it. You know what I mean? But when we actually truly looked into it, and then we started to dig in a lot on the equity and diversity side of what was preventing folks as well. Um, we started to come up with solutions, and we actually started to look at that context of, okay, yeah, some people might be failing and we do want to know why the failures, and especially why are the failures happening maybe in certain employment equity groups or certain age ranges as well. But what's happening with that other category? What is that other category that aren't failures? And why is it so high at a certain point in the process? Well, some of them didn't even have access to a particular medical center where they could get this particular medical that they needed
Yeah.
for the process, or they didn't have access to a particular gym where they would run the physical tests. So, what did we do when we saw that? We decided we would fly out instructors to those areas and hold the session for them and come up with alternatives for them to access the appropriate medical tests to support their applications. And we saw a big difference coming out of that.
Yeah. I love that because what you just said, you actually hit on the first few critical points to being data informed, which is identify your objective, which from what I hear, it's like we need to understand how we're hiring. What are our limitations? And so then you built the infrastructure to obtain that relevant data, which you were getting. You were collecting it in. But a lot of times, what happens there is people just get it and they look at it and it's, success, failure rate. And it's just, okay, let's report on that. And then sadly, even more so, a lot of times you just try and beat those numbers. So you're solving for symptoms instead of root cause. You're doing all these funny things. But what you actually did in that moment was you said, okay, wait, let's actually dig in a little further to understand why this is and get more data qualitative on top of that quantitative that you're getting. And you got so many more insights. And you probably actually not only made solutions for it, but you probably shifted the data you collect. I'm assuming now you ask better survey questions of, do you have the resources or tools you need to be able to get through this application process? Do you feel supported? Like, there's such a critical piece of going back and assessing, um, are you actually collecting the right things, and are you getting the qualitative on top of the quantitative to make sure that you're seeing everything so many times. And actually a perfect example is always an engagement survey. We did one every year, and I would always say to the leaders that this is going to show us some really interesting insights, but most importantly, it's going to show us smoke, and it's up to us to then go dig in and find the fires, because you're not going to get the
It's not gonna
specifics
be
just
super
from this
clear.
survey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a gray zone, and that you actually have to go through exactly, "There's the smoke, we need to go and find the fires." There's always after work to do, and it's I find it's interesting, like you said, people dig into the numbers and they try and beat them the next time, or it just stops, "Here's a bunch of numbers, here's the status quo." And what like, exactly what you said is in terms of after we were receiving, rumors of information, and I would go and look on various blogs as well where people were applying into this process, because it was very common for them to write on various blogs their experience and issues they had, or problems, or whatever the case may be. um, so we developed that kind of exit survey for the
Yeah.
selection process as well, like, where did we go wrong? Where were you not able? Like, where was the support not there for you? Did you have the access? And man, did we ever get good information from doing that? And
Yeah.
it started that whole new phase of data collection.
What you did there, and this is actually such an important piece of information, is you went from outcome data, outcome analysis to predictive analysis. So often when we use data to inform decisions, we get stuck on just outcome related data, meaning, even let's say you had, we'll bring it really simple. Let's say you had a party at work, a Christmas party, just because we finished the new year or the year. And you want to say, like, hey, did you have a good time? Was this satisfactory? Yes, no, maybe so. You're getting outcome related data. But if you really want to understand what led to a good party and true engagement and satisfaction and praise and all these things, you start to ask questions that are predictors of that
The
success.
next party. Yeah.
Yeah, and so but it's a different level of inquisition. It's a different level of data collection. And so it sounds like once you got more predictive, realizing, okay, what is predicting people to drop off instead of just the outcome of we have failure here. You then realize here's some barriers and here's what we can switch. And if
Mhm.
we provide better, health screening or opportunities for it, then we're going to actually reverse that number. It's like a beautiful thing. One of ours that we got really into was predictive analysis of how, from the moment someone gets hired into the company, how do you get them productive, having an impact,
Mhm.
and engaged as soon as possible? And so, outcome analysis might be like, okay, where does someone have an impact and we're good? Predictive is starting to realize that if people have the right clarity and expectations, if they have the right tooling and resources, if they have the right context to make decisions. There's predictive things that if we can tweak those early on and we can measure them, we know that based on our analysis that drives higher impact and higher, like, speedier time towards impact. So now we can start to adjust those and dig deeper into those. But so often I think we just don't think to dig into it, and we actually don't get enough data to tie the predictors to it. And so it gets more exciting when you can collect more and then start to see some of these really sometimes important correlations, but more so really great causations, which is what you want to be able to tell.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, like you gave the Christmas party example, and I have a little bit of a different swing to it that I think back on like pretty often, and it was from a couple of years ago. We were asked to organize our big holiday event in December, and we had a new VP who had arrived, and so this was almost going to be kind of like her debut. You know what I mean? Her debut, like the whole branch, whole of the HR branch was invited, and we were putting something special together. And I remember having a conversation with my boss at the time about like dates and getting things planning and timing. And he was really adamant that this be like a 5 to 7 event. Um, and I'll give you a little bit of context in that single male, no family, no kids, workaholic. Okay. But sure, anyone could have had that suggestion. So he was adamant, this is a 5 to 7. This is how it's going to be. And I said, well, I don't think that's a great idea in terms of timing. I'm looking from other perspectives, but if that's what you want, if that's, you're not budging, fine. Anyways, we send it out. We're looking at ticket sales and whatnot. Abysmal, totally abysmal. No one's accepting. And in fact, people are accepting, but editing the response going, I can't, I have to pick up my kids. I can't, I'll miss my bus home. I can't, I've got stuff going on in the evening. And I remember actually having an argument with him. And it did get slightly heated at once because I went to him and I said, listen, I'm seeing all this information come in. Our ticket sales are super low. I'm getting responses back. I can see the amount of responses. I'm seeing a pattern here. I really do think we need to adjust to the timing of this party to be actually during work hours. And maybe it slightly goes into a little bit at the end of the day, but this will allow people to still get home. There's weather, there's traffic to contend with. Don't have daycare options. They want to be with their families. It's the Christmas period. They probably have events. Really do think we need to do this. And he said, I told you, we argued and we got into it. And he said, nope, no, it's going to be 5 to 7. And if people don't sign up for it, that's their problem. And I said, well, we're going to have a really low turnout. And I said, I'm not sure it's going to be the best result for our new VP who's kind of having her inaugural kind of outcoming or here or whatever. And he said, well, then we'll just cancel it. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't think that that's the response to it. I said, no, I think we need to make this adjustment. And the funny thing is that he was so caught up on making the adjustment and it looking like you've made a mistake. You've just admitted a mistake you've made in terms of the timing. And you're such an it. We're all idiots, for having done that. And I said, like, on the contrary, actually, I think it means that we were very well informed by the data that we collected. Yes, we started out with A, and now we're going to end up with B. And it actually validates to folks that we saw that and we listened and we
I
made the
100%
adjustment
agree.
based on the data. So I said, I'm so sorry, but I think your perspective is very wrong. And I sincerely think that we need to adjust this. And I think we'll have a much better outcome and we'll have much better engagement from the staff and they'll appreciate that. Anyways, we argued. He said no. He finally came back to me later on and said, okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'm sorry. We did it. And our ticket sales went up significantly. Got multiple messages in from employees going, thank you so much for adjusting this. Now I can
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z. And I really appreciate the change and I'm excited to come and participate. But
It just makes me realize that so often this is what happens is as humans we have something called confirmation bias, meaning we look at our own life and we assume something based on ourselves and then we actually even more so go seek data and an interpretation that validates it. So putting, his hat on, he probably thought, single, I'm young, I want to have a good time with everyone. And then he went to people without even thinking about it, but naturally doing that would be like, oh, I agree with you. Let's do that. So he sought data, qualitative data. He just did it through targeting like minded people
exactly.
that
But that's
confirmed his already biased view of it. And so first thought
that's
is that, which is so interesting. And even more so to that, that's why you need to actually truly build the right tooling or the right source of acquiring data that removes some of these biases and pulls in different views. And you can't be so stuck to your own view that you refuse to listen, because then what the heck are you doing? And you can't use the excuse, oh well, I'm data informed. It's like, no, data informed means you still have to expose yourself to all the information at play, and then make a better decision. But to me, this is my favorite thing about data. Like, so I think I became so obsessed with it because when we were small, I could make such pointed decisions because I knew everyone. Half my job was just talking to everyone. I
Right.
was, the person at the company that everyone came and shared all their darkest views and brightest opinions about. And so I had this source of info in my head that when I needed to make decisions about the people, I could go through all that data. But then as we grew, and actually specifically I'd say when we got to 150, Dunbar's number, 150, there's a belief, I don't know how to say it, but there's a theory, I guess, Dunbar's number, that when you get to 150 people in any social society, whether that's like even friendship, family, or work, you cognitively cannot hold more than 150 relationships at that depth to understand them. And so you need to build mechanisms once again to be able to acquire that all of that information to still make great decisions. Well, you do that through data. And my favorite point is that you get to shift mindsets. You get to shift perspectives because the data doesn't lie. It's not rippled with bias. Instead, I mean, unless you have response bias, meaning you built the survey wrong and so you're getting different responses because of that. So you have to look into that. But more so than not, you are exposing yourself to something that naturally I think as humans we often avoid, which is people disagreeing with you, people sharing truly how they feel. Data isn't even like just sentiment, it's actual outcomes, it's movement, it's roles, it could be anything that you want to collect, it's timelines. And so it's just such a beautiful insight that I don't understand why people wouldn't crave to know more,
Well,
you know?
exactly. Crave to know more. I love it. It's like when we talked about all of our data collection on like Pinterest and stuff. Where data, what were we talking about? Creativity versus was it
Resourcefulness.
resourcefulness? We talked about the creativity and the data collection involved in like wanting to make crafts and whatnot and gathering all the pieces and everything and putting it together. Anyways, I'm
Yeah,
done.
like to me, it's all information acquisition and data informed decisions is using modeling or using different forms of analysis to really drive better decisions
Right.
or inform better decisions depending on what you are going towards. And so I think there's an easy way to do it, and like maybe we'll end with this just so that people really can like, how do I put this into play? Because I think a lot of times it's like, well, I don't have the money to hire a people analytics team that are going to do, I don't have the background in data analysis to build these models and to acquire everything. Well, you can start small. Have an objective, have a hypothesis, and then look and say, what's the critical information I need to know to have a decision or to drive and inform a decision at the end? And then start collecting it and interpret it and look to see where are the outliers, where is the interesting data points, and then go get qualitative analysis to build
Right.
on top of that and dig and let that really inform your decisions and evolve the process. One of the interesting things that we got into that was later on, but it wasn't that finessed, was we noticed a trend. I had this hypothesis that actually my hypothesis started with, I was like, people that aren't performing, they seem to be hiding in the organization because we're thousands of people. Instead of getting truly, performance managed or even fired, they just jump around to different teams. So my hypothesis was we have a lot of low performers hiding. And if we look at across the board people and their role changes within a 3-year period, I bet you a high percentage of the people that have experienced the jungle gym of the company are actually low performers. And then my data team, rightfully so, said, well, don't you think you're biased to only looking at the negative? Like if we look at some of our strongest performers, they're always in high demand. So they're going to move around. And I was like, you're right. That's probably that too. Okay, let's dig in. Let's pull all the data around people that have moved positions, more than once per year in the past. You choose your timeline, 3 years, 6 years, and then let's see how that correlates to our impact categories and what we say there. But then let's also do a deeper qualitative analysis to go back and talk to leaders and understand why they moved.
Mhm.
And our insights were insane. And like, it just became so interesting and it drove. And it didn't actually, once again, it wasn't data driven. It didn't drive a specific thing. What it did was it became a tripwire that we would use that data if someone moved more than once per year in their role, that we would just pause and say, okay, let's talk to the leaders. and yours might be twice per year. You get to decide, but having those data and those triggers and tripwires, you then get to make a more informed decision. And it ended up being that it generally was more extreme. They were either a high performer, or they were a low performer,
Mhm.
but rarely, if ever, were they right in the middle. And
Okay.
so we use that very often. And like, to me, that was just a cool data pull.
Now that is a really cool data pull, and it makes sense when I think about some examples on both ends of the spectrum. Multiple changes due to really high impact individuals, very driven, high demand, as you said. And then the inverse, obviously, and those who need to keep constantly moving because once they hit kind of their quota or their cap, they need to move on to another team. So that doesn't get unleashed or whatever, unhidden, like as you said.
Yeah.
But cool that you had someone challenge your bias like that and say, like, hold a minute, flip it on its head and think, don't you think maybe possibly the opposite is true as well? And
Yeah.
you
The cool
don't.
thing, the cool part is when you go, okay, yeah, I could see that. So you have someone challenge you, but then you go, okay, let's start collecting and let's see. Like, no one gets to decide. So your example earlier, I think a really important piece of using data to drive or inform decisions is you need to really have a hypothesis and then put it aside and use the data to tell the story.
Okay.
Um, because if not, you're going back to the confirmation. If you want it to tell you something, it's going to.
Yeah.
There's also a thing called recall bias, which I've fallen into a few times. You know, when you read like survey results and one thing really stands out because it just like maybe it's an initiative you were working on. You were working on a leadership program, and there's one data point that says our leaders are becoming stronger and, more knowledgeable, resulting in higher performance across the board. And it's like that's one sliver of the whole story. Yet because it relates to you, you're like, I'm going to tell everyone that. And I'm going to forget to say that, oh, we've hired in a bunch of senior leaders and it's not just my program that's been the cause of that effect. And so I think that we need to really watch for these biases that come in, but then also utilize the data to tell the story and reframe our thoughts and question our strong beliefs, and not be afraid and don't let our ego get in the way of, yeah, having better outcomes or analysis that are predictive of the future.
I completely agree. And I think on that note, Britt, I think you've magically summed that up for everyone. A lot of good examples in this episode, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny. There's more. I feel like we could do another data one
Yeah.
on like going deep. Like it'd be fun to get a guest on and be like, okay, let's walk through and build this together because like a simple model versus a more complex. Because I just feel like there's a lot of theories in this, but people might be left going, okay, how do I do this? How
How
do
do
I start?
No, it's a really good point. And like myself, I think I even had another two examples that I could have touched on and we probably could have dug into, but we don't have hours to bore people with our
I was
data.
like, I don't think people will listen exactly.
So do you want to move on to wine time then?
Well, I guess so. Let's go.
I guess so. Who ever thought about dry January? No way.
Not us. Okay, I'll
Not.
be right back. See you soon. And we're back with one time.
Whoa!
Yeah, screw the dry January.
Fuck dry January. That's gonna be it.
I got a sparkling rosé, but I don't have the bottle because you're gonna do your review.
My review. Okay, so I have a Jacobs Creek Reserve Chardonnay 2021, South Australia. I
Oh, I was
thought
gonna say, is it Canadian? But it's not, eh?
I thought Jacobs Creek was a Canadian one. Maybe it's a blend. I could have sworn Jacobs Creek was Canadian, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. It
You
does.
know which one? I feel like I've seen it at like the Loblaws and stuff at the wine.
Yeah.
Isn't it there?
I usually buy it in the local
Yeah. Who
like
knows?
section, but maybe it's a blend or something like
This
that.
makes me laugh. Super informed wine review, eh? We're like, maybe it's a blend. It might be from Australia. It might be Canadian. Who knows?
Yeah, literally no clue. Okay, so let me just have a little sip of this because I haven't had a sip of it since last night. So,
Since last night. Oh, shoot.
so
What
it's
do
a
we think?
Chardonnay.
Oh, buttery?
Yeah, it is. Like got that nutty taste, but you know what I realized, and I had some last night. I'm just not as big of a fan of Chardonnays as I used to. You know what I mean?
You've
And
said this a few times, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I keep saying it. And I don't know why it seems so Chardonnay seems to be the gateway wine to other wines for younger people because for me, it always was, oh, I'll have a Chardonnay. It,
I don't know anyone else who started with Chardonnay. So I think that just talking about this data episode, I feel like you are biased and you've asked others and confirmed your bias because in my perspective, everyone starts with like Pinot or Sauvignon Blanc.
okay, well, I wasn't. For me, it was always like a Chardonnay. And now I go back and I enjoy a Pinot Grigio much better. And it's actually got a lesser intense taste than the Chardonnay. Like, you know what I mean? It's very
Yeah.
distinctive, like the
Well,
oak.
that's why I was be surprised that people start with the Chard because it's so overwhelming. Like you either to me it's like one of those things where you like it or you don't. Whereas a Pinot Grigio, like I feel like it's just more appropriate. Everyone kind of drinks it.
I mean, so what you're saying is I've actually classed down in terms of my wine preferences over the. I started high apparently, and now I'm just like your basic Pinot bitch or something.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
What you're saying?
I don't know.
I see. That's right. Anyways, it's a good little shard. I know for sure I wouldn't have paid more than $15 for this because I don't like to pay more than $15 for a bottle of wine unless I feel special that day. And then maybe
And
go
did you
to
feel
like
special that
night.
day, Chels?
No, I guarantee you if we look because I can't remember exactly, I guarantee if you look this up, I probably paid $15 for it, maybe 16, and I probably got like a little deal, like $1 off or something, which is
There you
why
go.
I bought it. Because
Buy five, get $1 off all.
no, it's just like the single bottle, obviously. That's not enough of a deal, Brittany. Like,
No?
oh, 20-cent discount. Perfect. It needs to be at least $1. It
Okay.
never is a good discount on, booze and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I
But
go to Safeway now.
it's nice enough. It's nice enough. It's a nice little,
What would you rank it 1 to 10?
probably 6.5.
Oh, so it's not that good. You keep saying it's nice enough and all these, like, positive things, but then you
I
gave me
mean,
a
it's still good.
6.5 and you told me you don't like Chardonnay anymore.
It's still good because like 6.5 is still above average.
Yeah, but not much. We're not telling our viewers to go out and buy this.
Okay, it's nice if you like
Mm,
Chardonnays.
okay, okay.
Okay. But for me, it's only hitting at about a 6.5, maybe 6.75. I don't know. My palate could be off today. Maybe
Is it?
I've overdrunk probably in the last little while. Like I
Everyone
said,
else is
I
like dry January. You're like, I'm coming in hot for January. We're getting through January with a
coming in
wine every day.
coming in hot. Still have loads of booze and loads of treats and snacks in my cupboards left
Yeah.
over from the holidays. That all needs to go. I'm not going to throw it out because that would just not be very, you know.
I know this is the thing is like everyone gets on these health kicks in January, like we said on the New Year's resolutions, but then they have all these things left over. And it's like, do you just like binge it all? Do you give it away? Do you throw it away? What's the right
Mhm.
answer?
You do like your mom when she came to my house on New Year's, brought a load of her stuff over, like admittedly great stuff for a charcuterie board and that. And then she's like, I got this bag of chips and I got that bag of chips. And she brought her magnum ball of bubbly, which was truly massive. Like it took some time for us to get through that bad boy. But yeah, she was prepared to like offload all the unhealthy bits at my house.
Yeah, yeah,
We
smart.
were prepared to, use them to their fullest.
There you go.
Yeah. So
That's what I should do. Just have another party and serve it all.
the thing is that you get a party going, and like for example, we hosted at New Year's and bought so much stuff. Obviously, we had loads of food, loads of alcohol, and people drank. People definitely drank, but they all
You
brought
have a
stuff too. And then
yeah.
so like I feel like I ended up with more than I started with.
Usually you do. I mean, I do a lot of parties when we're back in the summer, and every time you end up with, like, more
More booze.
because people, like, bring a bottle, they do this, and I don't know, it's I mean, it's a great thing, it stocks your house, but yeah, you get a lot of extra, you're right.
There was a good cleanup though, I'll tell you that.
Oh, that's the part I hate the most.
And there was a good New Year's nap, I'll tell you that too.
Oh, yeah, good, good, good.
Absolute necessary. But yeah, anywho, okay, forget about New Year's and that. What do you have coming up? in the next?
I mean, not much. January in Arizona, it's beautiful weather. It's a little cooler right now than it has been. So I mean, just I guess enjoying more indoor activities, still going outside, but not enjoy like it's not as hot in the sun.
Yeah,
And so I'm trying to, get a plan for the year. When are people visiting? When are they not? And get a bit more work stuff. I actually just today I've been like toying with going back to Harvard to finish out a program I did. And if I finish this last module, then I become I've joined the alumni group and a few other things.
sweet.
And I've put it off because I think part of me wants to fight like the stereotype of going to a big school and what it means. And I just want to be like, oh, you don't need that and all these things. But I woke up and thought, you know what? I'll learn from it. I'll meet a bunch of wicked people. It's a really cool opportunity. So why not just do it? And so I
Cool.
applied for that today. So we'll see if I get in, but that will be fun if it does. It's like a 2-month program uh, on leadership and business.
Is it
And then
online? Is it in person? Like,
I
how does
think,
it work?
well, 80% is online and then 20% is in person on
Yeah.
campus.
Okay, I remember like what you did before then.
Yeah. Yeah. But the last one was 2 years and this one's just 2 months.
Wasn't
Yeah.
the last one the tail end of it? Like
The
at
li the
COVID?
last one I flew back from it, and it was COVID. Like, it was I came back to then shut down Shopify.
Oh my
Like,
god.
I had a town hall, like, 2 days later, and I was like, "We're" or email, like, "Everyone go home."
Oh
Yeah,
my
it was wild. And so maybe that's also a little bit of, like, I don't wanna go back. It brings back, like, PTSD of
Yeah,
the
it would
chaos,
be. It would. Yeah, here's hoping that that's not the outcome this time after
right?
you finish. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fun that you applied for that. What a good idea.
Yeah, my big thing, I mean, we talked a little bit about resolutions. I'm just continuing on with things, but something I heard the other day, I don't think I said this last time, but I found it so interesting. There was a stat on people learning to drive, and they were talking about the reason why they get people to learn to drive when they're 15, 16 is because at that age you don't have a strong fear of death, and learning to drive is so dangerous and risky that you need to teach before they have a strong fear of death, or else it's really hard. And if you look at people that learn to drive in their 30s or 40s or later in life, it's much harder. And most people just never learn because it's too scary. And so I kind of listened to that and I found it so interesting. And I went, what would I be doing if I wasn't afraid? And so part of me is like just trying to ride that wave right now. So maybe that was a bit of the application too.
Oh, that's
So
clever.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
isn't that smart that you went back and turned that a little bit?
Yeah.
Go back to my 15, 16-year-old self, and if I wasn't scared shitless, what would I actually do?
Right?
I'd probably be like, bungee jumping or something, but I'm
Oh
still not
god.
sure I'm interested in doing that.
I would never do
Being my
that.
15,
Ever, ever, ever.
year-old self.
But, like, what it is an interesting question of just, like it's almost like this interesting game of would you rather. Like, if you weren't scared, would you rather do A or B? And, like, excuse me, what would that look like? I just think so much of life for good reason, we've lived all of our lives and had a lot of experiences, so fear comes into play. But
You know I love a good game of Would You Rather.
I know it's your favorite.
That's right.
What do you have coming up?
Listen, it is going to be a quiet January for us. Not dry, of course, not dry, but quiet enough. Like no real visits, in our neck of the woods. Typical kids are back into their activities and stuff, soccer, dance, and whatnot. We don't have another trip booked until February, so we'll be kind of homebodies until then. Maybe the weather will roll around. Haven't gotten really snow yet here in Ottawa, and I'm not complaining whatsoever.
I was gonna
It's
say maybe the wall Pilates will actually come into place.
I still keep getting targeted on
I
Instagram
know you send
all
it to me, I
fun.
die.
And
So
then
funny.
and then other memes about how I'm not going to do those types of things. So I've really confused Instagram at this point with
Oh, it's so
their
good.
messaging to me. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's super interesting, like how the weather is here. So we're still going outside like quite a bit. And you know me, I'm not a big outdoor winter fan. So it's like I don't want to be out.
Yeah.
But like Carter's still going out. He got a little electric scooter at Christmas and he's been going out daily on the road doing his little electric scooter and it still feels really comfortable to go out and walk around. So
So
I'm
this might be a little cheat of when we recorded this because I will laugh so hard if by the time we publish this, it's like a snowstorm and everyone's
oh my
listening,
god,
being like, "What
you're
does she
so
mean? There's
right.
no snow." This is getting recorded slightly in advance. We are in January, but it's not.
It's not as advanced in January as when the episode will release. That's a really fair point. So I'm looking at a beautiful sunny day and it's still green grass and you're right. When this actually launches, it may not be the case. And I'll eat my words if it's a
I know.
snowstorm or something, an ice storm. But for now, I'm going to enjoy what nature has allowed us in terms
Yeah.
of mild weather. So I'm gonna
Yeah. I watched this other thing I watched recently was this really okay, actually two shows. I know this is like really diverging, but they're interesting. Have you watched Doctor Death?
no.
Oh my God, Chelsea, you need to get on it. So there's the documentary, which is called Bad Surgeon, I think, which is a true story. But then there's like HBO or whatever streaming you watch on, and it's called Doctor Death, and
Yeah.
it's with the guy from Dawson's Creek, the first season.
Pacey?
Yeah, the brunette.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he's in it. It's so good, and it's like crazy about these horrible doctors that don't know what they're doing and they're killing people, and it's just so
So
interesting though. So
is it like a docu series? Like it's
so
like
there is a docuseries, but then there's this dramatized version of it. So I
okay.
watched both, but the docuseries, I think it's called Bad Surgeon and it's on Netflix.
Okay.
It's like a 4-part series and it's this doctor that's trying to use stem cells around plastic pieces of organs to replace like the breathing tube, but then they die and he keeps doing it and he knows it's not working. But there's all these twists
Oh
and
my god.
turns and he's just like a true
Dr. Death.
psychopath.
I'll write it down. I'll write it down
Bad
for my
Surgeon, yeah.
playlist.
Um, and then I also watched recently this other docu-series about twins, and one of them went on a vegan diet, and then the other one went omnivore, and it talked about like their health and how everything changed based on their diets, but it also went into like the food industry and all these crazy things. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go more plant-based. It's a wild, wild ride out
What
there with
was
all
it
these.
called again, that one?
Um, I don't remember. It's something about twins.
Oh,
It's on Netflix too.
something. If you think about it later, text it to me. I'll
Okay.
look it up. I'll look it up. No,
Have you
nice
watched I just
to
feel like January is the time to watch
yeah,
TV.
things that give you regret about your lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I was like, you know, do more of this, do less this, go less on social media. Now I'm just watching documentaries that scare the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Like, find a way to make yourself feel guilty. I will find
Yeah,
it.
next time they're like, "Oh, too many glasses of wine a week is gonna do this to you," and I'm gonna just ruin my month.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's interesting though.
Knowledge is not power, knowledge is fear. Knowledge is
Shut it down. Just shut it down.
Sit down and fuck off, Netflix. Stop
Yeah,
telling
I'm
me
gonna
the
watch a
things I
lot of
don't
TV
wanna
in
hear.
January. That's what I've decided.
You will or you won't?
I will.
Oh, okay, well, that's a great, like, little resolution. I'm just gonna watch loads of TV. Yeah, perfect.
Just decided. Enjoy.
Constantly informing yourself. Well, that's amazing. Sounds like you have a super fun January in store.
Just
Probably
binging Netflix.
similar to mine when I have the chance to watch the Netflix, I guess.
Yeah. We know we're old when we call it the Netflix, Chels.
Oh my god.
It's like the
You
Facebook.
have to point that out to me. Yes, I do say the Facebook or the Instagram and stuff like that. Yeah, I know.
The TikTok.
I'm an old soul.
I'm an old soul. There you go. Okay, well, with that, I love you. Enjoy your wine, your shard. And to everyone else, stay warm, enjoy your January, and get curious on data.
Watch Netflix.
Yeah, all of it. Okay, bye.